We are diving into a global crisis that is absolutely unprecedented. It has brought international travel to a complete grinding halt. In fact, people are calling this the worst travel crisis since the absolute peak of the 2020 pandemic. We're talking tens of thousands stranded and the skies over one of the world's most critical travel corridors totally silent. So today, we're going to break down exactly what happened, why it happened, and what this all means for you and for travelers everywhere.
To really get a sense of the sheer scale of this thing, let's just start with one number: 1 million. And that's not some future projection, okay? That's the number of passengers who have already been directly hit by this. These are people who had tickets, people waiting at the gate, some are even in the air when this whole crisis blew up. Every single one of them represents a story of total chaos and disruption. This is a massive human event and it's unfolding in real time.
You know, this line right here, it just nails it. The Persian Gulf isn't just a place on a map. For the entire global aviation industry, it's the heart. It's the central pump that moves people and cargo between east and west, 24/7. So for that heartbeat to just stop, well, the entire circulatory system of global travel is now in critical condition, and the shockwaves are being felt at the furthest ends of the network. All right, so let's begin by looking at the physical scope of this paralysis. I mean, it's one thing to say the airspace is closed, but it's another thing entirely to really visualize the huge swath of the planet that has just suddenly become a total no-fly zone for passenger planes. Just look at the sheer number of countries on this list: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Israel, Bahrain. And we're not talking about small nations here. Their combined airspace covers millions of square miles. Then you add in Jordan, parts of Syria, and even the powerhouse hubs in the UAE and Qatar, putting in these crippling closures. It creates this chain reaction, right? Once one country closes its airspace, the pressure on its neighbors becomes so immense that they have to follow just for safety. You're basically looking at a map with a giant "Do Not Enter" sign scrawled right over the Middle East.
And the result of those closures is devastatingly clear when you look at these three airports: Dubai International, or DXB, Zayed International, AUH, and Hamad International, DOH. These aren't just airports, they're global mega hubs. For Dubai, which is routinely the busiest international hub on the entire planet, to be barely operating, that's just unthinkable. With these main arteries connecting continents completely severed, the whole model of modern long-haul travel is, right now, completely broken.
So how on earth did we get here? How does the sky, a symbol of connection, get shut down so completely and so fast? Well, the answer lies in a rapid military escalation that left the civilian aviation world with literally no other choice.
This timeline just shows how incredibly quickly things spiraled out of control. It all kicked off this past weekend with joint military strikes by the US and Israel, which they code-named Operation Epic Fury. Iran's response was immediate. They launched missiles and drones. And just like that, the very skies that thousands of passenger jets were scheduled to fly through became an active war zone. With civilian safety totally compromised, aviation authorities had to make the only call they could: declare the airspace unsafe and order a complete and total shutdown.
Now, a crisis like this is never contained, right? The impact just ripples outwards in this massive domino effect that touches every corner of the globe. So let's break down how that happened, starting with the airlines themselves.
So the very first domino to fall? Well, of course, it was the regional carriers. Airlines like Emirates, Qatar Airways, Etihad, and flydubai, these are giants of the industry. Their entire business model is built on connecting the world to their hubs in the Gulf. With those hubs cut off, their operations just stopped. We're talking about hundreds of the world's biggest airplanes just sitting idle on the tarmac. And it didn't stop there, not even close. This immediately blew up into a global problem. I mean, look at this list of international airlines. Carriers from the US like Delta and United, European giants like British Airways and Lufthansa, and major Asian players like Air India, they all started pulling out, canceling flights, and basically drawing a huge circle around the entire region. This wasn't just a few canceled routes. This was a strategic withdrawal from a key part of the entire global network.
So all of this creates what everyone is calling a logistical nightmare. But what does that actually mean? Well, a flight that once took a nice direct path now has to navigate this huge no-fly zone. These new routes are squeezing all this air traffic into super narrow corridors, creating massive congestion. They're also pushing planes to their absolute fuel limits, which forces unplanned stops. For instance, a flight from Houston had to be diverted all the way to Prague just to get more fuel. And then that creates a new problem. The original crew has timed out. They've hit their legal working limit, so a new crew has to be found somewhere. It's just a cascade of delays and ballooning costs.
But beyond all the logistics, there's the human cost.
And this is just devastating. Numbers can feel pretty abstract sometimes, but this one is specific and powerful. 58,000. That's how many pilgrims are currently stranded in Saudi Arabia after finishing a deeply personal journey. And the reports from the ground are just heartbreaking. Families are separated, tour groups are stuck, you have people sleeping on terminal floors from Beirut all the way to Singapore. Behind every single canceled flight, people's lives have just been thrown into absolute chaos.
And you guessed it, the economic ripple effect was immediate. Investor confidence has been totally shattered. As you can see on this chart, major global airline stocks like Lufthansa and Air France-KLM just plummeted by nearly 9%. This shows a deep, deep fear in the market about a long-term disruption, a fear that goes way beyond passengers and into air cargo supply chains and even to the price of oil, which is now rising because of all the instability.
So with thousands of their citizens trapped all over the world, governments are scrambling to respond. But the approaches they're taking are, well, they're varying pretty dramatically, and they really reflect different national priorities and what these countries are capable of.
We're seeing a really fascinating contrast here. On one hand, you have the United States issuing this stark, urgent warning, depart now, basically putting the responsibility squarely on the individual. But on the other hand, you have nations like the UAE stepping in to pay for hotels and meals for stranded passengers, while Thailand is waiving visa overstay fines for tourists stuck there. It's a really clear difference in philosophy: urgent self-reliance versus state-supported aid.
All right, so this is the big question, right? The one on everyone's mind. What happens next? When are things going to get back to normal? Well, the unfortunate reality is that this is not a problem with a quick fix. We are at the very beginning of a long and really complicated recovery.
This quote is so important for managing expectations. Reopening the airspace? That's just step one. Think of the entire global fleet of aircraft as this massive, intricate clockwork mechanism. Right now, all the gears are in the wrong place. A plane that's supposed to be in London is stuck in Prague. The crew that was supposed to fly it is in Dubai. It's going to take days, maybe even weeks, to get all those planes and crews back where they need to be. The gridlock on the ground is going to continue long after the skies are finally declared safe again.
Okay, so this brings us to the most practical part. For anyone watching who might have travel plans, in a situation this chaotic and this fluid, what are the concrete steps that you should be taking right now?
All right, here's what you need to know. First, and this is the most important, check your flight status constantly. Don't assume anything. Second, and please listen to this, do not go to the airport unless your airline has explicitly confirmed your flight is operating. The airports are already completely overwhelmed. Third, you just have to adjust your expectations. This is not a one-day problem. And finally, be prepared for higher ticket prices pretty much across the board for the foreseeable future.
So the bottom line is this. The day the skies closed has triggered a chain of events that just isn't going to be undone quickly. The cascading effects, the logistical, the human, the economic, they're going to ripple through the global travel system for weeks to come. It's a really stark reminder of just how interconnected our world is, and it leaves us with a critical question. In an age of increasing volatility, is the global system that connects us all far more fragile than we ever thought?